because I mean, lots of people are happy to sing the phone book as long as it's got 3-part harmony, or some people, you know what I mean? There's lots of different schools of thought on lyrics, and for me, music is just a vehicle to express those thoughts.
This is Uncover the Music, the only podcast devoted to Barrie's local music scene, presented by BarrieUncovered.ca. This is Uncover the Music, presented by BarrieUncovered.ca, the first episode ever, first of many. And B Knox is here. Barrie has been playing in and around Barrie for several years. Painters Hall, British Arms. You've been in the Battle of the Bands at the McLaren Arts Center a couple years in a row.
Yeah, under the band called the Bailouts.
Bailouts. So welcome, Barrie. Thank you for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
Your first ever. You get a blender.
I get a blender?
Yeah.
Great.
There's no blender. I'm
No.
just kidding. No.
That's a murder weapon if you use it right.
Maybe one day we'll have prizes like blenders, but right now we're just starting slow, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Chase that all.
Start off with one of those plastic fans you get at the fair.
Yeah, that's right.
And then eventually blenders. Well,
we'll get to the blender
one of those
day.
handheld milk frothers will be next.
So you're not from Barrie originally. Where are you from?
No, I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland. Well, yeah, around St. John's, about an hour and 15 minutes south of there.
So tell us the story of getting from the Rock to Barrie. How did you get here?
Oh, that's a myriad little tale. I started we lived in a little place called St. Philip's outside of St. John's. My family's from a little town called Renews, my mom. So we were there until I was about 7. My dad was an architect, and he got a job in Toronto, building the IKEAs and a couple of other things that were happening at the time in the mid-'80s. And we left Newfoundland, around that time, and moved to Whitby. I was there for a couple of years. Then we moved to Northern Ontario, and if I can possibly describe this place to you, it's a little town on the CN rail, nestled between Highway 11 and 17. In fact, where we were, the highway, diverges, and then the space where I lived, which is called Hornpain, was in between White River and Hearst, Ontario, which, is about an hour and 15-minute drive to one and about an hour and a half drive to the other. So we were, 3-hour drive between the two of them in the middle of that, between two major highways. I seem to recall that section of our highway getting into our town was not actual highway, it was just dirt road.
This is road.
Yeah, it was literally a CN town. If
Yeah.
if the CN rail didn't go through there, it would never have existed. And then, so then I, just before I went into high school, my mother and father had split up before that point, and my mom had met a forester up in Northern Ontario, as you do. I think it's only lumberjacks and train engineers up there.
And trappers that have been up there since like the 1930s.
Well, I think he probably was a trapper before that. No, he's a wonderful man. He was a forester, and so we ended up in Huntsville, Ontario. That's where I went to high school, and then from Huntsville, I left and went to university. I did a couple years up in Thunder Bay, where my dad is from originally, and I did the remainder of my first degree at York University in Toronto, and then I went back to Lakehead University for the one-year teaching program.
Growing up in Newfoundland, obviously a lot of musical influence there.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
And that must have been quite an experience, sort of almost like a teaching ground, a unique sort of Newfoundland sound.
Yeah, there's definitely a sound to Newfoundland. Where I grew up was a place called the Irish Loop, so I didn't really know anything about what was then popular music. As I grew up, I only knew about Irish rebel songs for the longest time. I just thought that,
that's music.
That was music. Huey Lewis or Bruce Springsteen, these things were unknown, foreign things to me.
Mainlander stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Mainlander stuff.
So were there any big musical influences in that when you were younger that sort of stuck with you?
Yeah, I remember, and this is not a Newfie one by any stretch, but Stan Rogers is a big influence. He's a great songwriter and great, East Coast kind of sound, that booming voice. It's hard to ignore. But where I grew up, there was a band called the Wolfe Tones that were a big Irish rebel band named after General Wolfe Tone, obviously. They were a big influence. Ryan's Fancy was from Ireland, but was East Coast based band. There was another band that was a very small time kind of Newfie band at the time, huge where we were, but nowhere else knows anything about them, called Stogger Tight, and they were a huge influence. I remember hearing their live tape when I was in my late childhood, early adolescence kind of, and hearing their tape from a bar that my uncle owned at the time, actually called the Blarney Stone in St. John's, and it was Staggertight live at the Blarney Stone. I listened to that tape probably 50 times.
So is that when music, even at that age, did you know is that when music kind of latched onto you and you thought, I've got a passion for this, an aptitude, or was it later? When did that happen?
Oh yeah, right away. Probably earlier than that even. I mean, musical influences weren't the thing. That was something inside of me already. It was just trying to figure out what outlets were out there, you know. And then of course when we came to the mainland and I heard all these other bands, it blew my mind. And then of course high school, and you get into all that stuff.
So when does it start that you're thinking, I'm going to do this as a career? Was it a long time ago?
No, it was a couple of years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just sort of, so what were you doing as an occupation before you were a musician?
I did all kinds of things. I was primarily, I got my teaching degree, so I was teaching for a while. I went to England for a year and taught in London, which was a great experience. And then when I came back, I taught at a couple adult colleges. I taught at a preschool, taught kindergarten there as well. And then eventually I kind of wanted to be my own boss. So I went into real estate briefly. I still do real estate actually to the side, but very, very infrequently. And then eventually just really got forced into doing music. And I don't mean forced like I was handcuffed and thrown in the back of a car, but in the sense that...
Is this some bizarre action movie?
Yeah, no, it's not the Bill Cosby version of... or Harvey Weinstein version of music careers. But no, I just kind of kept pushing it to the side, you know, kept thinking, yeah, well, this is a bit of a party trick. It wasn't something serious until I started playing live again. And I played in university to pay the bills kind of thing, but it wasn't anything serious. And then eventually, I started playing at this restaurant here in town called Painters Hall, and I got encouraged to play my own stuff. So I started playing my own stuff, and then I got encouraged to go into the studio and record some of that stuff, and then it got a really positive response. So now I'm about to launch a debut album this year, and
that's really good. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I want to know who pushed you, because it sounds like there was a sort of support around to say, you know, you got to do this.
Oh yeah, it was a bit of a collective. Yeah. Few people. I mean, the owners of Painters Hall were really, really supportive from the get-go. They were the ones who, you know, Shane, the owner, and his wife Erin said, you got to come in on Thursday nights. No pressure. You got a couple hours of songs. Yeah, sure. I'll come in. I'll play some covers and do my thing, and then. A couple of my friends, my friend Amanda, my friend Scott, they had heard some of my originals and said, you gotta start playing those live. So I started doing that. It got a noticeable response, and so then they said you should record them. And so
how do you where did you start? When did you start writing songs? Was that a long time ago, or was that recent?
No, well, that was probably a long time ago. That was probably a long time coming. I mean, I was an English major in university. I loved writing, and big fan of, you know, the usuals, Bob Dylan, big songwriters, and it just seemed like a natural way to get a message out to me.
I would imagine a lot of musicians were doing that. They were writing songs for sort of as long as they can remember. But it's quite a different thing to say, I'm going to write a song and it stays in my room, or I play it in my garage when everybody's asleep, to saying, I'm going to take this song and now perform publicly.
Yeah.
So what was can you remember the first time you played one of your original songs? What was it like?
People kind of stopped and listened instead of eating their meals. Made a difference for sure.
And they clue in, because they're like, you kind of have this natural, when you're out somewhere, it says, I'm going to hear a cover. I'm going to hear Led Zeppelin. I'm going to hear, well, not Led Zeppelin, but you know, I'm going to hear something. And then people
I do entirely Motley Crue for the most part.
With the hair and everything?
Yeah.
But people clue in, right? They're like, wait a minute, I've never heard this before.
If it's good. If it's good. If people kind of just go, oh, yeah, continue on, then... And that's kind of how I've road tested most of my songs. I play them live, and if people stop for a second and turn, then I know I've done something right. And if they don't, then I know I got to keep working.
How do you write a song? Do you sit down at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, it's time to write a song? Does it just sort of, you're driving along and the lyrics hit you? How do you write a song?
Both of those ways, yeah. A lot of the time the inspiration will come, especially when I'm driving or I'm walking or doing something like that. I'll get a line in my head or an idea in my head, or something will click. Or I'll hear a cliche somewhere that somebody's used, and I'll break it apart and put it back together a different way. And then it's a 9 to 5 job. Then I get up in the morning, first thing, have my coffee, and I write and I work it and I edit it and I grind it out. And then usually what happens is I either have an idea of how I want it to sound, or it's inspired by some other song, or I've got a melody in my head for it, and then I try and recreate it with a guitar or a piano, but that doesn't always work out. So it becomes a little bit of a grind then. And the editing process as well. I'm very particular about how I don't like throwaway lines. Bob Dylan has this idea that every song should be chorus worthy, or every line in a song should be chorus worthy, and I kind of adhere to that.
That's a bit of the Bible or the church that you pray at, eh?
Yeah, because I mean, lots of people are happy to sing the phone book as long as it's got 3-part harmony, or some people, you know what I mean? There's lots of different schools of thought on lyrics and how they, but I mean, for me, music is just a vehicle to express those thoughts and things. It's just my thing.
So let's get into one of your songs. What are we going to hear?
We're going to hear a song called Take the Keys.
Tell us about Take the Keys. Is this one of the sort of B Knox originals that you wrote a long time ago, or is it a more current one?
It's a more current one. I wrote it while I was in session. So I started the album in November of 2017 and finished it just this past, December I finished it, but I did a couple more edits in the early part of 2019. But I finished it in December of 2018. This one came along in the last session. So in December is probably when this one was laid down. And it's a very simple acoustic guitar and voice one, which is rare on the album. There's only a few of them, and which is strange because most of my forte is playing just an acoustic guitar myself. So, but yeah, this one came along in the last session, and I'd kind of written it in the fall leading up to that. The themes and images are very much how I named the album, Heartbreak and Landscape, because it's kind of got both those elements in it. I kind of take pieces of what I see around me and I build a story around them.
You were mine, but I pushed you away. So I know you couldn't stay. That's not the truth, you know it too. You were never mine anyway. We hear caution from the wind. It chose just to pretend. Those winds of change, they blew straight. Caution fucks us in the end. I watch the world go by from the passenger side, a witness to my own life. Think I should take the keys. It's time for me to drive. I was yours, but you threw me away. So I know I couldn't stay. That's not the truth, you know it too. I was never yours anyway. I was never yours anyway.
That's Take the Keys from B Knox, our first guest ever on Uncover the Music, presented by BarrieUncovered.ca. That's a great song, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, it
Appreciate
really.
it.
Tell us a little bit more about putting that song together in the recording studio, because it's part of your album, so we'll get to that. But how about laying down that song? What was that like?
Yeah, well, I had a couple on my last session in the studio with Aaron Goldstein. He's a producer, where they didn't really sound like full band songs to me, or I didn't really want to make them bigger than they are. They're two very simple sentiments, both the songs. Well, not simple sentiments, but very simplistically written, simple melodies. And this one I'd kind of road worked a little bit. I only had a couple of verses and a bridge, and there wasn't really room to build a big chorus or to build a big band sound out of it. So I just said, hey, why don't we lay it down the way it is, and then we'll add a couple of little overdubs to it, pedal steel or something. And Aaron ended up playing this killer pedal steel solo at the end. It's probably my favorite part of the entire album, which is why I picked it for the podcast. But yeah, so we kind of laid it down really, really bare bones. Put a lot of reverb on the vocals and tried to make it sound spacey and out there. And
now, Aaron is a high-end producer. He's produced a lot of good stuff. Tell us about him and how you got connected with him.
Yeah, Aaron's a wizard. So when people said to me, hey, you really should start recording your songs, I kind of sat back and made a little list in my own head about who I would want to produce or who I want to work with on an album. And I knew of Aaron through Bry Webb's solo albums. Bry Webb is the lead singer of the Constantines. And I'd picked up 2 of his solo records, and the band that backed him was incredible. So this guy, Aaron Goldstein, who plays pedal steel, was one of the members of the Providers, Bry Webb calls them. So Aaron was one of the people playing on that album, and he also had a guy named Thomas Hammerton who plays piano on my album. So those 2 kind of came along, and Aaron's found a few other people to play on the album, and we laid it down. I insisted that we kept the band consistent through all the sessions over the year. So it's all the same players, all the same people. But Aaron and I started that song just with the simple idea that I would sit down and sing it and play it without any kind of meter or metronome or anything behind me, and just see what came of it. So.
And how did you connect to Aaron? Did you have mutual friends? Did you just call him? How did you?
Yeah, so I had this list of producers, and I basically sent an email to Aaron. We had each other on Facebook. I had been in the studio, not his studio, but another studio before, and they were kind of mutual friends involved. And so I just approached him on Facebook and said, hey, listen, I've got a couple demos, and I'd really like to send them to you. He said, okay, send me an email, and sent me his email, and we connected that way. And then I sent him the email and immediately said, yeah, I hear music here. Let's get in and make it.
Now that's the litmus test, I would imagine, is like when somebody who is established with cred says to you, yeah.
Yeah, sort of. Aaron plays his cards very close to his chest, so I didn't know until our very last session, over a year of working together, that he really did enjoy what he was doing with me, and actually liked the songs, and was, he was kind of held back a lot, which is great, because for somebody like me who doesn't have a band, I don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of. I just write alone in a vacuum, so to speak. It was great at the end of the whole session then to get that kind of positive feedback and end on such a high note where he kind of said, yeah, no, I believe in this. This is great.
So could you describe the feeling of going from when you're a teenager, when you're writing songs, to performing at these venues? Now you were in a legitimate studio with a really established producer. You were actually in there recording a song. What's that like? Was it cool? Was it scary? What was it like?
The first day was incredibly intimidating, because you go in, it's a full band day the first day, so that then you can spend the next days doing overdubs over top of the bed tracks, right? So once you make the bed tracks, you set the stage for everything else. So the first day is when you have everybody there, and all the players on the album were people I knew of, I'd heard of, play with big name people. So sitting in a room and playing my rickety little demos off my iPhone for them was a harrowing experience. And it's day one. I shake hands with everybody, basically sit down in the control room, and we start playing these demos. Okay, what do you guys hear? What do Aaron's kind of trying to lead the charge, and I'm just sitting back shitting myself, basically. and then we go in and we start laying down. I think the first one we did was a song called Stars and Burnt Bridges, which is I think it's the least cohesive song on the album from a thematic, imagistic, stylistic point of view, but it fits still all the same. But yeah, it was the first song we laid down, and there's nothing there. I'm not a drug guy, but there's no drug like that. Hearing a bunch of professional musicians play your music and make it come to life like that is, if I could spend every day writing something just so that a studio band could play it behind me, I would do that for the rest of my life.
So the album is done. Is it? We're recording this last week of April. Is it done? Is it ready to go?
It's completely done. It's mastered. It's all ready to go. So under the advice of my label services and my record label, we are going to release 3 singles over the course of the next 6 months. So will be a single at the end of May, a single at the end of July, a single at the end of September. Some of them will be A and B sides. This first one will be on 45 on vinyl and digitally, obviously. And then the full album will come out at the end of November, hopefully just before Christmas time. It's a very, dark, wintry, Christmassy, not
Angsty.
Christmassy, but definitely autumny winter album. So it's the right
Get
time
you
for it
through
to
the
come out.
existential crisis of the changing of the seasons kind of album. That sort of
Yes,
thing.
yeah. The panic that everyone feels after they've been in school for so long, and then September rolls around and they're not in school anymore. That's how musically I would describe it.
So you'll come back and later in the year when the album is out and the singles are all out, and you'll come back and talk to us.
I'd love to. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
So before you go, we're going to uncover 5 truths about B Knox. You were sworn you have to answer honestly for all these questions, okay?
I
Ready?
do so solemnly swear.
First concert you went to?
Very, very, very first concert was, and I can't remember which one came first, but it was either Raffi or Mr. Dressup. I would say that the Raffi concert. We followed Raffi from St. John's to Toronto. We were living in Whitby at the time, but we had gone home.
You were a Raffi groupie?
Oh, for sure. In fact, we sat on the plane. I sat with 2 of the band members in my row, and Raffi was in the row behind me.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
It was
man.
pretty incredible. And it was funny because we met him in the airport, and there's pictures of me, hugging his leg and getting a tape signed by him and everything. And then again seeing him again in the airport on the other side of the journey. So yeah.
Maybe you can get him to come on one of your albums in the future. That'd be great.
I would
B Knox and Raffi.
love that. Big part of my childhood. So that was the first concert I ever went to. The first concert I went to of my, on my own steam was Eric Clapton at the Sky Dome. Bonnie Raitt opened for him. It's pretty big.
Yeah. Is it
influence.
in 94, 95?
Somewhere in that
Around
area.
there,
Yeah,
mid-90s,
somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, mid-90s.
Name of the first person you kissed?
Oh my God. I honestly, and this is going to sound ridiculous, I don't remember. I remember the first girl who really
There have
broke
been
my
so
heart.
many?
Yeah, no. There were too few, and my brain cells can't hold small amounts of information.
First person then you loved or whatever.
I had a girlfriend in the beginning of high school that really crushed me and basically paved the way for all these songs.
So you can thank her in the liner notes.
I probably won't, but
A movie that you were embarrassed to admit that you paid to see. Either you rented it or you paid money and actually went to the theater.
I'm not easily embarrassed by that stuff. I'm glad to announce when I've gone to see a really good movie or a shitty movie. One of the ones that my friends all make fun of me for all the time is A League of Their Own. I think it's one of the greatest movies.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's a fantastic
That doesn't
movie.
count.
It's sports, it's comedy, it's all the things.
All right.
But a lot of the times my friends will do this thing where they go, "Oh, what's your top 5 sports movies?" And the macho jock dudes, and they all want to talk about Rudy for 25 minutes. And I always bring it up and I go, "Yeah, this is a great movie. Tin Cup's great, I get that. But this is a great movie." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, there's no crying in baseball," and we move on.
All right, okay, we'll give you a pass on that one. Last one, if you could invite one person to the pub for a pint, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh my God, that's a tough one. I'm a big believer that company makes the time, so I'd probably pick I'd probably pick this. Probably pick you.
Well, that's very kind. I don't think anybody will ever answer that question with me, so I'll take it. I'll take it and run with it. Great. So, how do you have a website? Do you have social? How do people access your music?
We're just getting all of that up and running, so hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have some sort of link for you.
How about like Instagram, Facebook, any other ways that people can?
Yeah,
can get
Instagram at B Knox Music is a way to follow me and follow what's going to happen and when. And I'm sure once we have all the websites and everything, it'll be tagged through that. So, a good way to get in touch with me.
Thank you very much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Uncover the Music is an exclusive podcast produced by BarrieUncovered.ca and presented in association with the Fox Lounge and Rock Bar, where the recording took place. Subscribe to Uncover the Music on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever else you get podcasts. And find out more about us at BarrieUncovered.ca, on Facebook, and on Instagram. The handle is at Barrie Uncovered.
still here? It's over. Go home.